Monsters is a YouTube channel about the worst human beings on the planet. The episodes of this podcast deal with murder, dismemberment, torture, rape, child abuse, and mental illness. Please turn back while you still can. Viewer discretion is advised. If you want to read more stories about the worst people on the planet, or find ways to support the show, you can visit our blog at thisismonsters.com. Statistically, serial killers are far more likely to be male. At one time, people believed that female serial killers didn't exist, and there are people today who still claim Aileen Wuornos was the first female serial killer. The truth is, 16% of serial murders are committed by women, and we know of female serial killers who operated way back in 1820. Here are 5 female serial killers. 1. Velma Barfield. Margie Velma Barfield, who went by Velma, grew up in a poor family, and in order to escape she married her high school boyfriend, Thomas Burke. They had 2 children together before the relationship soured. One day, after Thomas passed out, Barfield took the kids and left the house, not long before the house mysteriously caught fire, killing Thomas. A few months later, the house caught fire again, which resulted in an insurance payout. Shortly after that, she married a man named Jennings Barfield. He eventually became mysteriously ill and died of a heart attack. Barfield moved back in with her parents, and shortly thereafter, her father died of lung cancer, which is believed to be the actual cause of his death. Her mother suddenly became ill and had to be admitted to the hospital. While there, her symptoms went away and she was released. A few months later, the symptoms came back and she was readmitted to the hospital, where she died a few hours later. After her mother died, Barfield started working as a caretaker, and multiple people became ill with the same symptoms and died. She had started dating a man named Stuart Taylor, who caught her forging checks from his bank account. Soon after, he became ill and died. At that point, an autopsy revealed arsenic in Stuart's system, which led authorities to exhume and test the body of her second husband, Jennings Barfield. When they found traces of arsenic in his system as well, they arrested Barfield. She confessed to killing her mother and some of the people she cared for, but was only convicted for the murder of Stuart. Velma Barfield was sentenced to death for the murder of Stuart Taylor. On November 2, 1984, Barfield was executed by lethal injection. She was 52 years old. 2. Joanna Dennehy. Joanna Dennehy could have had a normal life living with her boyfriend John Trainer and 2 daughters, fulfilling her dream of becoming a lawyer. Instead, she killed 3 men and attempted to kill 2 more before being arrested and put in prison. The couple had met when they were young and, though they were never married, they had 2 kids together. Neighbors said that Dennehy would be physically violent with John and would take off for weeks at a time. She would return drunk or on drugs, and once overdosed and had to be taken to the hospital. Her stomach was covered in scars from self-inflicted cuts. John finally took the girls and moved away, and Dennehy moved to Peterborough. In March of 2013, Dennehy's landlord, Kevin Lee, had given her an eviction notice. He planned to renovate the property and needed the premises to be vacated. On March 29th, she stabbed Kevin Lee in the chest, dressed him in a black sequined dress, and then dumped his body in a ditch. His body was found on March 30th. She then killed her roommates, Lucas Slabowski and John Chapman. Lucas was stabbed in the heart and Chapman was stabbed in the neck and chest. Their bodies were found in a different ditch on April 3rd. Dennehy and her boyfriend, Gary Richards, traveled a couple of hours west to Hereford, where Dennehy stabbed 2 more men at random. Those 2 men were rushed to the hospital, where they recovered from their injuries. Both Dennehy and Richards were arrested shortly after the stabbing spree. Joanna Dennehy pleaded guilty to 3 counts of murder and 2 counts of attempted murder. She was sentenced to life imprisonment with a recommendation that she never be released. Prison staff found a written escape plan in her cell that involved cutting off a guard's finger to use on the biometric locks at the prison. Because of the plot, she was kept in solitary confinement for 2 years during the court proceedings. She has also made multiple attempts to kill herself while serving her time, but has been unsuccessful so far. 3. Dorothea Puente. Dorothea Puente had a troubling past. Her parents were both dead by the time she was 9 years old, and she was placed into an orphanage where she was sexually abused. In 1949, after her first marriage failed, she was sentenced to a year in jail for forging checks. In the 1960s, Puente owned and operated a brothel, for which she was arrested and sentenced to 90 days in jail. After her release, she was arrested again for vagrancy and sentenced to another 90 days. Her criminal activities slowed down as she found work as a nurse's aide, caring for disabled and elderly people in their homes. After a few more failed marriages, Puente took over control of a large 16-bedroom care home in Sacramento. It's believed that she would use the boarding house to swindle people out of money. She had a history of going to the bar and finding older gentlemen who were receiving benefits, then forging their signatures and stealing their money. It wasn't until she started renting out an apartment on her property that things started getting deadly. Her first tenant, Ruth Monroe, died of an overdose of painkillers. Puente convinced the police that she had been depressed, so they ruled it a suicide. She was caught drugging and stealing from those older men she met at bars, and after she was released from prison, she met a man named Everson Gilmouth. He picked her up outside of the prison upon her release and was never seen again, though she continued to collect his pension and write letters to his family to elude suspicion. She hired a homeless man to do some handyman work around her house, but he eventually disappeared as well. A social worker eventually reported one of her case subjects missing to police. The disabled man, named Alberto Montoya, was referred to Puente to board at her house. While the police were investigating, they uncovered the body of Leona Carpenter, another tenant, buried on the property. While searching the property, authorities allowed Puente to leave to get a cup of coffee. She immediately fled to Los Angeles. She tried to befriend another elderly pensioner, but he recognized her from the news and turned her in. Police found a total of 7 bodies buried on her property. In 1992, Dorothea Puente was charged with 9 murders, but only convicted of 3. She was sentenced to 2 life sentences and died in prison in 2011. She was 82 years old. 4. Juana Barraza. Juana Barraza was a professional wrestler in Mexico who went by the stage name La Dama del Silencio, or the Lady of Silence. She grew up in an abusive home and her mother sold her to a local man in exchange for 3 beers. She was repeatedly raped by the man and eventually had his son. She would go on to have 3 more children and started out supporting the family as a street vendor and with petty theft. She also made money as a professional wrestler. Barraza eventually started following older women home and then lying her way into their house. She would pose as a social worker, and once inside the house, she would bludgeon or strangle the woman to death and steal from them. These killings went on from around 1998 until 2006, and the police were baffled. They were looking for a male suspect and at one time believed they might be dealing with 2 men working together. After her arrest, it was even believed in the media that the killer was a man dressed in woman's clothes. On January 25, 2006, Barraza followed Ana Maria de los Reyes home. She had social work paperwork on her when she was caught, so she must have gained entry under the assumption she could help the resident receive benefits. Once inside the house, she asked for a glass of water. When Ana Maria's back was turned, Barraza picked up a stethoscope that was nearby and strangled the woman to death. Another resident in the home saw Barraza leave before discovering the body of Ana Maria. The police caught her while she still had the stethoscope on her. She confessed to the murder of Ana Maria, but claims that it was the only murder she committed. Her fingerprints said otherwise, as they had been found on multiple past crime scenes. All of Barraza's victims were over 60 years old, and it's believed that she killed out of resentment for her mother. In 2008, Juana Barraza was convicted of 11 counts of murder and 5 counts of aggravated burglary. It's believed that she killed more than 40 women. She was sentenced to 759 years in prison, but Mexican sentences are commonly served concurrently, so she will likely spend a maximum of 60 years in prison. That would make her 109 years old when she gets released, so chances are she'll die in prison. 5. Aileen Wuornos. Aileen Wuornos sometimes gets labeled as the first female serial killer. Though impressive sounding, it's not even close to being true. It's pretty well known that Wuornos had a horrible childhood. Her father was in prison when she was born and would later commit suicide while incarcerated. She was sexually assaulted and beaten while living with her grandparents, and after her grandmother died, her grandfather kicked her out of the house. At only 15 years old, she began working as a prostitute while living in the woods. Over the years, she was arrested multiple times for various crimes including assault, driving under the influence, and disturbing the peace. She eventually made her way from Michigan down to Florida, where she continued a life of crime. These crimes got more serious though and included armed robbery, passing forged checks, and car theft. A few years before Wuornos started murdering men, she moved in with a woman named Tyria Moore, a woman she met at a local lesbian bar. Starting in November of 1989, Wuornos killed 7 men over the course of a year. Her victims were middle-aged men who had hired her for sex. She would kill them and rob them, sometimes even stealing their car. Moore would help her pawn some of the belongings and was seen in one of the stolen cars before the women abandoned it. Authorities were suspicious of Wuornos but were having trouble obtaining solid evidence. It wasn't until Wuornos was arrested for an outstanding warrant that the cops were able to get Moore to agree to help them get a confession from her lover in exchange for immunity. Wuornos ended up confessing to the 7 murders but claimed she had acted in self-defense. Aileen Wuornos went to trial for the murder of her first victim, was found guilty and sentenced to death. Soon after, she pleaded no contest to 3 additional murders and was given 3 more death sentences. A few months later, she pleaded guilty to 1 more murder and was given a 5th death sentence. On October 9, 2002, Aileen Wuornos was executed by lethal injection. She was 46 years old. If you like these videos, please hit subscribe, click like, or leave me a comment. If you'd like to support the channel, you can donate a few bucks through Buy Me a Coffee. You can click the link within the YouTube banner or go to buymeacoffee.com/monsters. Another way you can support the channel is by using our Amazon link anytime you're going to buy something at Amazon. You can go to our website at thisismonsters.com and click through the Amazon banner. Anytime you're already going to buy something from Amazon, you can click through that link and buy your items at no additional charge, and we get a small commission. I'm always working to provide more content at better quality, and your support helps me do that. I thank you in advance.